Shall we roll it, folks? This now is a Fox News alert, and reading this. The U.S. Supreme Court rules in favor of former President Donald Trump in his appeal of a Colorado ballot disqualification.
Jay Secular, we just got the decision from the Supreme Court of the United States on the disqualification case. This is the case out of Colorado. We represented the Colorado Republican Party. Remember, they were trying to remove President Trump off the ballot. The decision came out today, this morning, just now. I am happy to report that we've had a unanimous victory, 9-0. All 9 justices agreed with the position we advocated, that the states do not have the authority to remove a presidential candidate from the ballot, that solely rests with Congress, which is exactly, by the way, what the 14th Amendment Section 3 says. So this is a huge win, the most significant win, and it should end all of these other cases. It will end all of these other cases. Now,
look, unfortunately for America, the court isn't necessarily wrong that this is the way the framers wanted it to be. They wanted Congress, the people who are closest to their constituents, to be able to make the rules and the laws. That doesn't change the fact that because of gerrymandering in the House and all kinds of other issues, they're not doing their job on a lot of these big issues.
Yeah. I agree. It's very unlikely, close to impossible that Congress will take action. But this is now a fair question that Manu Raju, Melanese, and Ona should be asking members of Congress. Mm-hmm. Are you willing to pass legislation that would give us rules for how this works? It could only be in the future, by the way.
The Supreme Court strikes down Colorado's effort to ban Donald Trump from its GOP primary ballot. In a unanimous decision, the High Court ruled that enforcement of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment is the responsibility of the federal government, not the states. This overturns a 4-3 ruling by the Colorado Supreme Court, with the majority of the U.S. Supreme Court bench stating that only Congress can enforce an insurrection ban.
It looks like page 13 of this. It says, for the reasons given, responsibility for enforcing Section 3 against federal office holders and candidates rests with Congress and not the states.
Right.
The judgment of the Colorado Supreme Court, therefore, cannot stand. So they're saying essentially that Congress has to make this decision whether there are insurrectionists who need to be kept off of ballots. Is that essentially what they're saying here?
Essentially what they're saying is it's up to Congress to tell us how this works. So if Congress had, let's say 50 years ago, Congress had passed a law saying we're going to let the states do it, so long as they abide by due process, then what Colorado did would have been fine. But Congress has done essentially nothing in the 150 years since the 14th Amendment was ratified in 1868. Now, I want to make sure people understand this. It's a very important feature of this decision. There is no substantive discussion in here by the Supreme Court of whether Donald Trump did or did not engage in insurrection.
Interesting.
There is no conversation about what the meaning of his words at the rally were, or what happened inside the Capitol, or any of Donald Trump's actions. That's not what the Supreme Court has done here. That's not what the Supreme Court typically does. This is a procedural, legalistic decision. And essentially, if I had to boil it down to one sentence, it would be, it's up to Congress, not the individual states.
They didn't want a big messy situation where all the states go here and there and that sort of thing.
The word I circled in this decision is, quote, patchwork. They said we don't want a patchwork where one state's doing one thing and another state's doing another.
Notable that today is the day that the trial against Donald Trump for January 6th would have started, and instead we're talking about this Supreme Court opinion on the 14th Amendment, and we're not going to get to talk about that trial because the Supreme Court last week delayed it through at least April, the end of April. And so the Supreme Court will decide that case. I suspect very strongly that that case will be the inverse of this one, that it's a unanimous or close to unanimous loss for Donald Trump on the idea that he's absolutely immune. And assuming the Supreme Court can reach that decision quickly, and I sure hope they reach it as quickly as they reach this one, then the trial against Donald Trump for January 6th can proceed, and we can learn, the American public, with all the evidence splayed out in front of us, did Donald Donald Trump commit insurrectionist acts on January 6th? That's the crucial question, and we, the American public, deserve to know the answer to that question and to hear all of the evidence before the election.
One of the curious aspects of this decision is that they waited until the day before Super Tuesday to drop it. It puts the wind in Donald Trump's sails. He's already said it's a win. We'll hear a lot more from him. Why do that in the 24 hours before Super Tuesday, in the media cycle around Super Tuesday? I would not have done that. Feels too political.
You could argue that there was a responsibility by the court to do that. Otherwise, those who may have voted for him Tuesday would be disenfranchised if indeed the ruling had not come in his favor, surely. Isn't there an argument there?
That is an argument for having released this decision last week or the week before. The timing of the Supreme Court is now almost as important here in the United States as the substance of the decisions. And of course, the place where this will really count, if they really believe that, they'll move fast on the immunity case, because Americans also want to know, did Donald Trump commit alleged crimes? And can we get that case to trial? Just as can the Supreme Court can move quickly here, will they move quickly there? Another very important question. But I would have done this last week.
And again, I am happy to report it is unanimous. It's called a per curiam opinion, which means all the justices signed on to it. It's not written by one justice. It was a collective effort. I think in a case like that, like this, that's very important because it sends a message to the country. But all these pundits that said, oh, Colorado has the authority and we have to allow the states to do this, got it wrong. We won 9-0 by God's grace. A great victory. Listen, this goes way beyond Donald Trump's presidency. This goes to the core of our constitutional republic. And that is the idea that a single individual, a Secretary of State or a Board of Election Supervisors, could remove a candidate from the presidential ballot is absurd and would have wreaked havoc, as we said in our briefs, throughout the country. The good news is, again, if you're just joining us, 9-0 in our favor. This will end it. We will now move to dismiss the remaining 6 cases. More at noon on Secular.
That applies to Colorado. In all likelihood, it will apply to other states as well. Live to Shannon Bream for her initial analysis and reaction now. Did you have the inside word, Shannon? Hello.
Okay. So what we have from the court this morning is this decision in favor of President Trump. They essentially say the judgment of the Colorado Supreme Court that he could be kicked off the ballot in this manner does not stand, has to be overturned. Now, it's a per curiam opinion, which the Latin for that is sort of the court speaks. It's supposed to be sort of a unified voice. But we do, as I'm looking through here, have some additional folks who wrote, Justice Barrett, and I believe Justices Sotomayor, Kagan, and Jackson. They write concurrences as well. So they may have gotten to this in a different way, but I don't see any dissents here. So it sounds like the court as a whole is agreed that whatever happened with Colorado, it was not the proper framework to use here. There is discussion at the end of the main decision that says, you know, there would be essentially a patchwork across the states. This was one of the worries that the justices had, and the questions that came together in argument were, what happens if we tell one state they can do this? The Chief Justice said, what if one state decides, okay, I'm kicking off a Republican, another state says, okay, I'm kicking off a Democrat, and then we get down to just a handful of states that actually have all of the candidates' names on the ballot. What would that do to this country? So it sounds like the majority of the court has come together in this voice to say what happened in Colorado is not correct. It sounds like they're saying states don't have this power, but essentially this is something that should be left to Congress. And so they agree to that point, but how they got to these different positions, how they got to the agreement, they found some different maps there, but they got to the same end result, guys.
I want to start by thanking the Supreme Court for its unanimous decision today. It was a very important decision. We're very well crafted, and I think it will go a long way toward bringing our country together, which our country needs. And they worked long, they worked hard, and frankly, they worked very quickly on something that will be spoken about 100 years from now and 200 years from now. Extremely important. Essentially, you cannot take somebody out of a race because an opponent would like to have it that way. And it has nothing to do with the fact that it's the leading candidate, whether it was the leading candidate or a candidate that was well down on the totem pole. You cannot take somebody out of a race. The voters can take the person out of the race very quickly, but a court shouldn't be doing that, and the Supreme Court saw that very well. And I really do believe that will be a unifying factor, because